I have to hit this?
Yes. You don't have to, just whack it.
I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the governing board. The time is 7 o'clock. Let the record reflect that 4 members are present and Ms. Frank is not here tonight. Can we rise for the pledge?
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
I move we adopt the agenda, moving items 6F and 6G to just after 2C.
Second.
Okay, call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes 4-0. Moving on to governing board reports. Ms. Ordway, do you have a report?
Sure. I was able to attend for a short time, I attended a meeting for Project Momentum, which was very interesting. Went to Music Rocks for a little bit, saw some strings and guitar playing, and I do want to recognize our Boy Scouts over there. If you could stand up and we can say hello. And just want to make sure that we all remember to enjoy our summer, whether we're off of work or not, and be really, really careful around water. So that's it.
Ms. O'Brien, do you have a report?
Yes, thank you. 3 of the board members were able to attend the ASBA Summer Leadership Institute in Flagstaff, and I think that it was a very worthwhile conference. There was a lot of workshops on leadership, as well as some discussions about student access to our different programs, and some equity questions. I also was able to attend the Arizona State PTA Awards Dinner, and would like to congratulate Mountain Shadows for having the largest PTA unit in the state of Arizona. They actually won multiple awards that evening. And West Wing and Norterra, and I apologize, I left my form at home, but we did have multiple schools in the district be acknowledged for at the PTA state level. So congratulations to all of those schools. Thank you.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes, I had also attended the ASBA leadership. It's interesting that there's even when you think there's nothing, there's little bits of information that you can grab, even if you don't agree with everything, because I don't always, but when it comes to governance, I believe we have a greater responsibility. But they give you little tidbits into what's happening in our state, and it's very helpful. I'm also, I've joined the equity committee with ASBA, and one of the greatest things that we did was with the Hispanic Caucus. I know it's, as a member of the Hispanic Caucus, sometimes we get lost in the shuffle of what we're talking about, but they did a really fascinating thing where we collaborated on ways to move forward, and everybody was welcome and everybody was there. It's really interesting. It was almost kind of funny. We joked about it being ran like an AA meeting because you had to stand up and say your name and everybody said hello to you. At first it was really, really weird, but it was a very respectful and I think a very productive conversation between different school districts on the hardships we faced during the time that schools were closed, and solutions to problems and ways to solve things so that we're not in that situation again. And I just thought it was really interesting, and I think it would be great if our board, if we were to have something like that for our community, to just get together maybe small groups, and just talk about what's happening in the district. I don't know how we would do it, but it was a really neat thing. Very diverse group, and we were all able to work towards supporting each other. I think that's it for this one.
And I have no report, so item B, superintendent's report.
Well, thanks. Mine's short as well. We're getting closer to getting all our building administrators situated. Hopefully after tonight we'll be closer. Two issues that I want to just kind of bring up that we are going to be talking about in the future. One is the starting pay for counselors. We've been notified that there's a little correction that needs to go with that. So we're working on that. Obviously, it doesn't impact people in the system today, but any new counselors that we would be hiring, we need to look at that situation that's popped up. So I think that more of that's going to come up as we start to put our salary schedules out and those kinds of things. Things will pop up that we didn't recognize when we were going through it. Also, there was another issue regarding people that are on leave, and so we're working with, that's a negotiated item, and so we're working with the NST on trying to figure that one out as well. And so I know Ms. Moffitt, so getting those folks together during the summer is a little tougher. So, but that's, both of these concepts are things that we can figure out retroactively as well. But we'll need to probably have to go down the MOU route, the memorandum of understanding between district and NST if we're going to make any changes there. But just want to let everybody know that we're working on it, and it's we're making progress. And hopefully June, July, August we'll be able to nail it down. That's it.
Item C, fiscal and business service report. Mr. Miglerino?
Vice President Tweedy, members of the board, Dr. Finch. Two quick reports to share with you this evening, starting with the financial reports for May. And this is showing a projected carry forward for the 2017-18 year of just over $1 million, $1,007,246. Month over month, so comparing this to April, we were just under $1 million, so not a significant change. And year over year, last year we were just at $1,003,000, so a $4,000 difference from a year ago. So again, no significant change either from last month or comparatively to a year ago. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the rest of the financial reports that were provided.
Does anyone have any questions? No. Nope. Okay, moving on to item 6F, approve the recommendation for the principal of Legend Springs.
I move that the governing board accept administration's recommendation for the principal of Legend Springs. Ms. Moffitt will announce who that is going to be.
So Ms. Miner and I are pleased to present to you this evening Amy Harding. She's in our audience. We'll let her stand. Amy? Amy's very excited to have this opportunity, and we are bringing her over from Scottsdale.
Okay, any questions, comments? Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0.
And welcome.
Moving on to item 6G, approve the recommendation for the principal of Sierra Verde.
Second.
I move that the governing
Oh.
board. I move that
Sorry
the
about that,
governing
guys.
board
Might be
accept
rushing.
administration's recommendation for principal for Sierra Verde School.
Second.
Ms. Moffitt will also let us know that candidate.
And we are also pleased to recommend Todd Dreifert. He is coming to us from USD 375 from Towanda, Kansas. And because he is in Kansas right now, he's not present with us this evening. We can wave at
He's
him.
watching.
Please watch and we can wave at him.
Any questions, comments? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes 4-0.
And welcome to him too.
And the leopards may now leave.
Yeah. Actually, for anyone, Miss Moffitt's going to FaceTime y'all with your new principal. I know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What in the world?
Did it work?
Move on. Next item, 3A, would be public comments, but the only speaking request we have is for an agenda item. So we'll move on to 4, old business. Item A, high school career and technical education CTE curriculum.
I move that the governing board approve administration's recommendation to adopt the proposed CTE resources and materials.
Second.
And we have a presentation.
We don't actually have a presentation because there's no changes to our original proposal.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions, comments?
This was the proposal that Dr. G did last time.
Mm-hmm.
Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes 4-0.
That was easy. Thank you.
Thanks a lot there, Kurt.
Moving on to item 5, consent agenda.
I move that the governing board accept the item 5A through S. Through S.
S.
Oh, second.
Okay, I'll call for the vote. All
Aye.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Moving on to item 6A, approve district superintendent's performance pay.
I, sorry. I move that the governing board approve the performance pay for the Deer Valley Unified School District Superintendent, Dr. Curtis Finch, in the amount of 90%.
Second.
Any comments, questions? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Item 6B, employee travel.
I move that the governing board approves all employee out-of-state travel per governing board policy GCCE. Are we going to do it as a, does anybody care if we do it as a one or all?
I prefer to do it as a package, but that's my preference.
Nope, I'm fine with the package.
Okay. do we have a
Second.
Okay, then, any questions, comments? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes 4-0. Item 6C, approve addenda pre-approvals for fiscal year 19.
I move that the governing board accept administration's recommendation to pre-approve the addenda as presented.
Second.
Does anybody have any discussion or questions on this item? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ordway, did you vote?
I did. I said aye.
Okay, 4-0, it passes. Item number 6D, approve fiscal year 19 salary schedules.
I move that the governing board accept administration's recommendation to approve the 2018-19 salary schedule.
Second.
Okay, we do have a public comment on this one, so I would call Denise Denise Derry up for public comments. I'm sorry about your name. And you read the admonishment?
Yep.
Okay.
fun out there.
The board invites public comments on the district's business in general and on any agenda item in specific. All speakers must observe the rules of decorum. Speakers must fill out a card listing name, address, and topic and hand it to the board secretary prior to the president's calling the meeting to order. Speakers must make their comments in no more than 3 minutes. If necessary, to accommodate all speakers within the 30-minute limit, overall limit, the board president may shorten each speaker's time. Constructive criticism is in order Rudeness, vulgarity, disruptive conduct, or remarks disrespecting personal dignity are not in order and will not be allowed. Under the Arizona open meeting laws, the governing board cannot discuss or act on any items not listed on the agenda. Board members may respond to criticism made by a speaker, ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. State your name for the record.
My name's Denise Derry, and I'm the lead counselor for the district, and I'm also a counselor at Deer Valley High School. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
I don't think you're turned on.
Okay, is it on? Do you have a little light on?
I do have a green light, yes. Do I just need to step closer?
Oh, there it is.
Okay. Okay, do you want me to start with my name again? Okay. My name is Denise Derry. I'm the lead counselor for the district. I'm also a counselor at Deer Valley High School. So good evening, governing board members and Superintendent Finch. So I came to you tonight because I wanted to talk specifically about the salary schedule that is going to be proposed tonight. I did send an email, so I'll just briefly touch on a few things so that, because I know Dr. Finch has already mentioned it. So if you have not already looked, the starting salary for an incoming teacher with a bachelor's degree is $39,000 for next year. For an incoming counselor who has to have a master's degree to do their job, it's going to be $38,804. So there's already a discrepancy right there, and if this is what's going to be voted on tonight, we just have some concerns about what what counselors are going to be applying for some positions. We do have 2 that are open right now, so if they're looking on the website to check what the salary schedule would be, then that would, if that's what's being posted as $38,804, we're very concerned about any potential candidates. So moving forward, we just want to know, I know Dr. Finch said this might be something we're going to be looking into. What does that resolve look like, and how quickly are we going to be getting that? Thank you.
Huh?
No, I didn't know if I needed
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you. Any questions, discussions on this matter?
Dr. Finch, when you said you
I don't
plan
think you
to
actually
look
can
into it,
Can you discuss it?
of course we can, because that's what we're doing.
All right.
If we vote to with this included, what would the process then be to change it?
Well, I think we could just do, the next time we figure out what that number is, we can do it separately and do it retroactively. I'm not worried about that. Because I'm not comfortable with the number at tonight. We haven't done the work on it, comparing our neighbors, et cetera, but obviously the issue is more about the masters and the bachelors being less because you have to come in as masters with a counselor, with counseling degree. So we'll get it. We'll fix it. It's not a problem.
So would it be more efficient to vote for it as it is and hope that it changes, or to separate that position from this and then work on it and then pass it? Or at least recommend something for it?
I think the negative of waiting is if there's any salary increases on there, they wouldn't be included this time. So I think most counselors, I could be wrong, but I'm just guessing, I think most counselors come into our system with experience. Because of the nature of the job. But you know who might know a little bit more is Miss Moffett.
I was just going to ask if she could weigh in on it,
there
please.
she is.
And I actually have some questions for Ms. Moffett specific. Ms. Moffett, because I actually have some questions specific that I thought you could answer. Now, most times when you're hired into a district, if the expectation is that job will require that degree, you don't get an additional.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a way that, how is there, because it is a higher level, it is a higher degree, how is that being accounted for now? Is it just, in theory, in its base? Is that what we're, because I know when I've signed my contracts, it's been that they look at my education, but I still get whatever my base salary is, and I get the additional for a bachelor's and an additional for the master's. How are we applying that? Because I'm trying to figure out if our salary schedule says the 30, what did you say, 38,804? Are we automatically going to add on, or that's it? Saying that there was no experience.
So Vice President Tweedy, Ms. Fisher, historically for Deer Valley, I'll give you a little background on counselors. We traditionally paid in the past counselors at the same rate or close to the same rate as a teacher. Back a while ago, a counselor also had the credential to be a teacher. That later changed and also then required a master's. So we used to pay the counselor and the teacher at the same starting rate and then added the master's on top at $50 per credit. Some masters have 36 credits, some have 33. It's just dependent on what it required based on the program that you went through. 3 years ago, because the counseling position did require the master's, like a psychologist does or other positions, we embedded the master's into the starting salary. So the starting rate for a counselor actually became higher than a starting rate for a teacher. With the implementation of the $39,000 that you approved in the last governing board meeting, that does now take a teacher higher because we didn't apply the same rate to the counselor. So what we're doing right now is finding out what other districts did. We do know that some increased their starting salary. I have only learned so far from one that has responded. One does not have counselors. They do have social workers instead of counselors, and did not increase those rates. They only increased the teacher rate. So our history might be a little bit different than other districts, but we do want to have that information before we apply the raise to that side as well. And from what I understand, there's an intention to do so. We just want to do it the right way.
What's our starting salary for a psychologist? Do you know?
Top of my head, I'm not sure.
Okay.
If I might,
It
according
could
to
be in front of you.
according to the handout we have in the board book, it's $57,455, and there's addendums if you have additional certifications.
Mhm.
And how did the psychologist and the counselors get separated? You just explained it. You said they were with the teacher, and then
A counselor and a teacher?
right, and then they were also getting the master's because they were the equivalent with a psychologist. But
Not a psych. Only that, I only paralleled that because a psychologist requires a master's. And so when we changed the counselor, they now require a master's, and so we embedded that as part of the starting salary. We embedded a master's into the starting salary rather than hiring them at the teacher rate and also adding on top of the master's.
Okay, but can I ask one question? So on the starting pay for a teacher, the $39,000, that would be with the bachelor's, right?
Correct.
So if it were a teacher that had a master's, they would get 50 per credit?
Correct. On top of that, if it's a related master's.
So
yes.
50 times, say, 33, right, would be a low end for a master's? So we'd have 33 times 50. So, wow.
Would that be the same logic as social workers?
So they would
Fire
get,
masters.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure if a social worker requires a master's.
so then if a teacher had a master, she would get, or he or she would get $1,650 extra on top of the $39,000.
If they have the masters, yeah.
And so if it were a teacher we were talking about, so.
it'd be 40.
Yeah, it'd be a little over
40,
40.
yeah, 40.
It'd be a little over 40.
That's
900.
that's true. Yes.
So I guess getting back to my original question,
I would recommend that you approve what we have today, and then we will go back and fix it once we can bring you a proposal that we understand.
I would prefer we remove the counselors today and vote on it without the counselor, because what happens when the board approves inequitable situations and then people
then it
come forward?
stays.
Well, not just that. Then they're informed, well, this is what the board approved, and we're the ones that end up looking poorly for that.
Okay.
So I'm not, I mean, if you guys want to vote on it that way, I don't want to vote on it with the counselors included.
I don't care what we look like. As
Yeah,
far
I
as
was just
that.
gonna
I just think it's unfair to
Well, I
them.
don't think it reflects my value system,
No,
so
it
I don't want it
definitely
said I
doesn't.
approved it.
But
You're really
Jenna,
only
what would-
talking about the starting because
Right.
you want the raises to go to counselors.
right, and this is
If
just
you
for
don't
the
approve it,
starting.
they won't get
so
a raise.
That I know, Jenna. What would the impact be, Ms. Moffett? What would the impact be on because there's 2 positions that are currently open? What would the impact be on us not approving a salary schedule? I mean, there's technically one already approved. It's just at a much lower amount
For starting.
for starting.
So it would impact those 2 people that we have not hired yet.
So if we hire someone,
Correct.
We could get a different caliber of an applicant if we're posting something that's lower than everyone.
Right.
I mean, you don't attract high-quality people by,
right? So what
The
would the impact be?
current, the rate that you see in front of you is the rate that will be currently applied to all of our newly hired counselors. So that would be those 2 that are posted and any others that we have hired from the outside coming in.
Okay, so if we were to hire,
Another factor to consider as well, what Jim is sharing with me is our practice over the last 3 years after Prop 123. We work hard to, when we increase a rate, not to let that rate, beginning rate, jump over someone that's in their second year of experience out of respect of their longevity with us. So we have to consider that as well, and he's showing that at 40,651. So if we brought the counselors in any higher than that, they would be jumping over counselors that started with us a year ago.
okay, but if they had 6, 7 years of experience, we would still give them the 5, and they would jump over them anyways,
Right.
correct?
Right.
With years of experience, that is true. This
Just
would be
worried about
someone
jumping over the
starting
first
without
year.
experience.
That's what I'm
compared to
worried about.
Someone else that started without experience 1 year ago.
Right. I'm worried about that we, with our intention of doing something right, actually make another mistake. So I'd rather have a proposal that would be sifted for you.
I did. Could you repeat that number again, please, Ms. Moffett?
40,651.
And for clarification, and I'm not sure which of you all to look at, has this has been, when did we change the practice so that we included?
Masters in the counseling hiring schedule.
Yes, thank you.
I said 3 years ago, but actually it was 4 years ago. It was 4 years ago.
And what is our current salary if we do not approve this starting salary that's in our board book?
This is an estimate because we don't have it directly in front of us, but 36,890 some.
That's a pretty good estimate.
You didn't have the pennies, though, but that was okay.
It's all right. I won't hold it against Jim or her.
So is there some way that, how is the motion is written that we pass the salary schedule as presented. So if there's got to be 6 words that we can add to that, that would convey the fact that we're looking at the counselor's salary, although I don't want it to look like we're, opening up and having this loose thing on the salary schedule. I want it to be a tight thing that refers specifically to counselors.
You could do an amendment that says with future proposal from the superintendent to increase before some date. So
Referring only to counselors, though.
starting pay for counselors. Yeah, you could do that. You could amend it that way.
How many counselors
I don't
do
want
we
any
have?
unintended consequences of our
Correct.
good faith effort to make a bigger mess.
Right, I understand that, and I do understand that sometimes when we increase the beginning salary, the second and third year employees are going to be very close, but at some point in time, you just have to do it.
Yep.
Because
We
people
can figure it out.
have to be attracted, so.
But the issue I have with that is we're approving something the way it's written now with the intention that they're gonna bring something else forward at a future date that we won't know if we agree with it or don't agree with it.
Well, as long as
I
it's
would
an
rather
increase.
just remove this and vote on it without it and then see what gets brought forward and vote on that.
Okay, two things. I think that we could do an amendment that does not just blanketly approve some number that administration decides on, that we could do an amendment that would require them to bring it back to us within a certain time frame. That's I think the amendment Mrs. Ordway was talking about. So the amendment would be something like, we approve the salary schedule as is with a directive that by August 1st, we have a proposal for board review to adjust the counselor salary.
And I'd like the word increase in it.
Salary increase is one thing. To your point, Mrs. Tweedy, because I understand what you're saying about not just giving the blanket authority and knowing whether or not we would all concur with that. But secondly, I do think it is important for us to approve at least the salary increase that is posted in the current salary schedule, as since we are in the hiring season. If we have to post the 36,890 and we don't act as our starting salary when other districts have already made that adjustment, it puts us even farther behind. So I would lean more towards approving it as is with an amendment to say we must have a proposal for the board to review by whatever date the board members agree to have. And I guess the question, as a follow-up question, is when do you think we might have a proposal for that salary increase?
I could put Ms. Moffett on the seat, but I'm thinking June 26th, the next meeting.
For the next meeting. And
Yep.
Ms. Moffett, the one question I do
I know they have
is,
option now, but I'm nervous about winging it.
how many do we have open?
2.
That's it, we have 2?
Yeah.
How many do we foresee that are going to be open?
2.
I think this will be it.
Okay, because we're talking about a difference of $196
Right.
between that and the teachers, the beginning teacher's salary. No, I'm just talking about just even with that. I'm just thinking we could
Just think that's the smart way to go.
I just had one more follow-up question about the concern related to the beginning teacher, the 1 year bumping up or over the second and third year. So I guess my question, Dr. Finch, is that we'll be looking at that piece of it, so that it sounds like for a few years now, one of the other concerns we've seen raised, sorry, that was kind of backwards, for at least the last year, we have had the concern raised about the counselor salaries, not just this starting pay, but in general over the last year or so. So it seems like for 3 or 4 years, we were a little upside down. And so will we be evaluating that as well?
No, that was, you already decided that at the last meeting, the percentage raise for counselors.
Sorry, I meant for going forward in the future. I know that this year is decided. I guess I'm asking, is that concern going to be addressed and looked at for the future, not this one right now?
Wasn't planning on it, but if the board directed me to go check it out, we do check it out.
Okay, and it looks like Mrs. Moffett might have.
Jim is a walking computer, so he's probably already figured it out. So that's probably what it's about. But
Okay.
Yes, Dr.
I
Schmidt.
always get nervous when we try to wing it, though. I am
No,
not
I
a
don't.
wing it
I don't
guy.
want to wing it. I really was looking at it.
Okay.
Is it something that you're looking at evaluating, or because I don't think?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yep. What do you have?
It is something that we're talking about right now and reviewing that. So the point that we do try and honor the longevity internally, if based on what the raise that we gave this last year to all of our brand new counselors that came in last year and coming into this next 18-19 year, if we had a starting rate of $40,000 for our counselors, there would still be around the $700 year of service differential that we like to apply to our certificated staff.
40 even? What are our 1 year making?
4651.
Yeah, so, because if you apply, essentially, if you apply what the beginning teacher salary is, plus the lowest possible masters by credit hour, it would be 4650. So even if we do that, we're still going to be underpaying them. It's still better, but we're going to be underpaying them, and
Something to note too, we have had a difference between counselors and teachers for some time now. And the difference that you see in that base, they won't be quite equal because your teachers qualify for classroom site fund money that's embedded in their base where counselors do not.
right. So that's what I'm saying. They're still going to be off.
Right.
Although that's probably a good number that Mr. M is giving you, I'd still like to sleep on it.
What I would like to make sure in the amendment that we include the date that we will have it as an action item,
Yep.
so we're not
I'd be comfortable
previewing
with
then
the
actioning.
next board meeting, June 26th.
But we want to have, are we going to waive our preview and have something come up as immediate action, or are we going to count right now as the preview and then call it back as old business?
I would think that my opinion would be that we go ahead and call it back as old business.
Old business, okay.
And get a Friday update, or Thursday update with the new proposal, so that we all have time to review it and ask questions before the next meeting.
Yeah, I don't think it has to wait for a Thursday update. I'd like to be able to go back and forth a couple of times so I can understand exactly
Okay.
what
Then
the implications are.
Based on that discussion, I move that we amend the motion to approve the administration's recommendation for the salary schedules with the instruction to provide us with an adjusted starting salary for the counselors on the June 26th meeting for secondary approval adjustment.
And I'd like the word increased to go in front of adjustment, an increased adjustment.
Increased
Adjustment for an increase. Just so it's clear that that's why we're doing it.
Yep.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes 4-0.
Now you got it. No, that was just for the amendment.
The
Nope, the amendment passes 4-0. Now we'll vote on the item. Call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that passes 4-0.
All right, thank you. We'll get on it. We'll get it done. Thanks for bringing it up.
And moving on to item 6E, to consider and if deemed advisable, adopt a resolution authorizing the sale of tax anticipation notes by the district.
I'll second it.
Mr.
Made the motion.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah,
Oh.
I'm trying to behave over here. Just saying.
Yeah, she actually made it. It's okay.
Vice President Tweedy, members of the board, Dr. Finch, each year we look at how we can effectively manage our cash flow. We start off the very first month of our fiscal year, which will be next month in July, and it's almost as if we start a new company every year. So that first month, unfortunately, we end up with a shortfall of about $20 million. In order to make our obligations. So we have to find the most cost-effective way to be able to have the proceeds necessary to be able to operate the district. For my entire duration here in the district, we have considered tax anticipation notes, which is a funding mechanism that basically commits our future revenue to be able to borrow the money up front. We do a cost-benefit analysis, and essentially that cost-benefit analysis of any other way to be able to provide for the cash flow needs. The tax anticipation notes, or we like to refer to them as TANs, ends up with a benefit of about $130,000 to the district. And when I say it's a benefit, it's because we invest a good portion of these tax anticipation notes to be able to earn interest on them. And that's where the offset comes from. So we borrow the money, we actually invest it because that first month we have a $20 million shortfall, but we don't have as great of a shortfall in the second month because we essentially get 1/12 payments with, for each of the months of, that we get state aid. Our tax collections come in biannually, so twice a year for local property taxes. And so that's where the cash flow issue becomes a problem for us. So this is the most cost-effective way to be able to ensure that we have the means to be able to meet those obligations. And so we're asking once again for the board to consider, and all the documents have been produced by our attorneys, for it's up to $35 million. We're still working on the actual dollar amount, but I'm fairly confident that it's going to be $35 million worth of tax anticipation notes. And I think it's important to note, we're actually borrowing the money from the Maricopa County Treasurer's Office. We've done this for probably the last 5 years. And this helps taxpayers in the county. So the county treasurer is always looking for instruments that they know have a certain credit value to them. They know us, we know them. They actually loan us the money without us having to go through a much more formal process of doing an offering statement and incurring much more expense. And in return, they offer us a discounted rate as well for borrowing the money. So all of the taxpayers, not only just the Deer Valley taxpayers, but all the taxpayers in the county benefit from being able to borrow this from, I consider it like a cousin to us, right, being the county treasurer. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, this is fairly routine. We do this annually. It's not the only way to meet the cash flow needs, but it is the most cost-effective way for us to do it.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? No?
Nope.
Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Moving on to item 7A, fiscal year 19 expenditure budget preview. Mr. Miglerino?
On this time, I'm sorry, Vice President Tweedy, members of the board, Dr. Finch. We are prepared to showcase, I guess, the ongoing discussion that we've had regarding next year's budget, fiscal year 19, or the 2018-19 budget. There is no action that's being taken tonight, but we are looking for some feedback from the board because there are a couple outstanding items that we're still including as placeholders in the budget development. So just briefly about the process, we've had several board study sessions, executive sessions, regular meetings talking about the major portions of our budget. Remember, our salary and benefit expenses is just over 87% of our budget. And so with the benefit recommendation and salary recommendation that came from the NST group, a lot of our budget decisions have been committed once the board acted on those. This year, which was new, we had the district budget committee that offered some insight into the direction of the priorities for the district, so it allowed our public to provide more input. Essentially, they had suggested, prior to knowing about anything that was happening with the movement to increase teacher salaries or salaries in general, they came to the conclusion that a salary increase was the most important component, and that was, remember, back in January and February of the start of this calendar year. In terms of time frame for things to expect, the proposed budget, June 26th will be the latest date that of a regularly scheduled meeting to propose the budget. In order to meet the official timeline, it is important to note that even though the meeting is on the 26th, we have to publish information prior to the 26th to meet the publication timelines. But if we consider formally approving the proposed budget on June 26th, which is our next regularly scheduled meeting, we would adopt the budget officially on July 10th.
Could you just tell us when you're going to publish it? Do you know?
Vice President Tweedy, the publication has to do with the paper that we send it in, and I believe it goes the Thursday before the 26th. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but
Oh, could you just include it in an update, the date that you're
Certainly.
oh, thank you.
21st.
We've had some financial priorities that we've identified. These are not new. We've had these this is, I believe, the second or third year. Again, salary increase for all employees, maintaining a limited capital funding, and managing our structural deficit. As we've shared previously, that has been one of the concerns that we've heard from even the rating agencies that review our financial records. And so this is just kind of an overview of what's included in, and the Gold Book, again, represents just a summary of the maintenance and operation or our operational funding. So the base support level, the M&O override continues at 15%. It was actually grossed up or increased as well due to the increase to the base support level for the governor's 20 by 2020 proposal. It does include inflation at 1.8%. There is a current year funding provision in there, so we're projecting a 0.5% reduction in student enrollment. We hope to beat that number as we did this year. The teacher experience index changed ever so slightly from 10128 to 10129, so it went up a little bit. And it includes the ongoing Proposition 123 funding, which really is a little bit redundant from the inflationary funding because both of those were a result of the Prop 123. In this version of the budget, we are updating it with the most current carry forward that we just spoke about, the $1,007,000 that was part of the May report we talked about earlier in the meeting. This question came up about staffing. We are using, I know we've used this term in the past, a staffing tighter model, but this is a +1. So we actually did not change the class size or loads, but we staffed them as if there would be one more student in each of those classes to minimize the surplus of employees, because we are dealing with projections of students. And so they're staffed that way. We also look very closely at open enrollment and things of that nature that can help to determine or better predict the actual staffing needs that we would have at any particular grade level. It does include the ongoing cut to district additional assistance. Even though district additional assistance was partially restored, we still are getting 65% of that cut, and it's at least $10 million. When they do the recalculation, that probably will grow to much greater than $10 million, but probably not in excess of $11 million. The cash accounts are included. Again, this speaks to our structural deficit. We did reduce the amount of the cash if you compare this to the 2017-18 budget, but we are still utilizing our 5 cash accounts as well as some additional cash accounts and previous decisions that were made by the board, including athletic participation fees and parking fees. The parking fee increase, I should say. It does include a projection of $400,000 for adjacent ways projects. We don't have that entirely worked out. There have been ongoing discussions about potentially adding a traffic signal at 51st Avenue where the buses exit. We also have another modernization project that's scheduled for next summer. So that $400,000 is not yet completely identified in terms of all the projects that it may afford. And the net increase is a pretty sizable increase in what we call our general budget limit, or GBL, again, due to the increase in the salary amounts that were part of the governor's plan and the salary recommendation the board approved. So this is kind of some of those details, all the way down to how much we actually are projecting would be the budget balance carry forward, or the budget balance remaining unallocated at this point in time. We did increase, I think it's worth noting, we did increase the contingency amount due to current year funding. So you see the amount there. And I know there was a discussion regarding the capital budget. So this is a limited allocation of capital at $4.8 million. That includes about $2 million worth of software renewals just to maintain our software programs that we have. About $1.2 million in textbook and curriculum adoptions, including the adoption that was previously approved by the board in old business tonight. It does include a small allocation to schools, about $750,000, and the balance is distributed throughout numerous district departments for the organization. That is being funded from the district additional assistance that we do receive. So you can see just under $5.5 million worth of district additional assistance. And district additional assistance is what originates as capital funding, but it can be used for capital or M&O expenses. So the balance there, about $500,000, is being used for other M&O expenses. And with all of that, we have an unallocated amount of just over $500,000. We have been tracking these 4 items. As you may recall, part of the NST recommendation included support for these 4 items that are recommendations to be added. You can see that is less than the budget balance remaining, so we could afford all 4 of these things and have basically a balanced budget. If they were to be included, these 4 things include a full-time district athletic director. That is the delta from the part-time position that we currently have funded and the increased cost to fully fund a 1.0 FTE. So it's not, that's not the listed, manufactured listed price of an athletic director. It happens to just be the increased cost. The additional school-based administration support, which we have talked about previously, making all the hard-to-fill nursing positions hard to fill at $2,000, which is the amount of the rest of the hard-to-fill positions that we have, and then the substitute teacher increase from $85 to $90, or adding $5 to the substitute teacher pay. Again, that's just under $500,000 if those were all to be included. And this is probably where we need the most input from the governing board. If we include those, we would still have a balanced budget, and that's what we would bring back to be part of the proposed budget for the June 26th meeting. Just I think some things that are worth noting. It's over $13 million worth of salary increases. I've been telling everybody that it is the largest salary increase. I went back and looked in 30 years that we've been able to give to our staff. So I've used the word historic, and I mean that in all sincerity, that it's been a long time since we've been able to celebrate something of this magnitude. We do have a slight decrease in teachers. Again, that's due to student decline. A very small increase in classified staff due to paraprofessional needs within our special education population. And then it does include the minimum wage increase, that's set for January of 2019, which is what that should say instead of 18. But if I catch my own mistakes, I get credit for it, right? Non-staffing side, I think this is another thing that's worth noting, that the health insurance rates for the employee, as well as for those that elect dependent coverage, will not be increasing next year. So 100% of that cost is being burdened by the reserves that we have at Valley Schools. And so our employees are not only going to see a significant raise, but it won't be eroded by additional costs for medical coverage, and that, because that has happened in the past. Unfortunately, state retirement is increasing slightly, but I like to refer to this as a forced savings account, right? It's money that you deposit in an account in your name that you get a future benefit from. It's just an increased cost, unfortunately, and that actuarial is set by the state retirement system, not by us. We are not increasing utilities, even though there was a rate change at APS, but due to the federal tax reform, APS is recalculating some of those rates for us, so we're going to take advantage of that and then continue our utility management program to be able to not have to increase our utility line. They had a small increase in special education tuition costs based on what we're experiencing. And then again, the capital budget being established at $4.8 million, which is up from the $4.4 million that we have in this year. And that's largely due to the textbook adoption being included in the FY19, the CTE textbook adoption and other curricular material. So again, I think it's also, and I know I'm restating this, but the district additional assistance is going to be cut by over $10 million at 65% of a $15.6 million allocation that's in the funding formula. I point that out only because it's a significant cut, but also with district additional assistance being fully restored, hopefully, as part of the governor's plan, we can look forward to, over time, having $10 million restored to the funding for our district, in addition to inflation, which is also guaranteed as a part of Prop 123. I don't know how far we want to get in the weeds tonight regarding the tax rate. Partly because we're still working on this, but there are some tax rate implications for the budget. The budget is increasing. Remember, the M&O override I mentioned is being grossed up because the base support level increased. The actual M&O override is paid for 100% by local taxpayers. So we are seeing that there's going to be a slight decrease on the primary tax side, and there's some things like delinquency factors that we don't quite have a good handle on. So it may be decreasing. It may not be as much as I'm showing here at 10 cents or 1%. The secondary rate we show increasing by 5% or 12 cents. So it's almost, it looks like a wash if you take the combination. But because the assessed valuations are increasing, so that the net impact ends up being about a 7% increase, or $66 on what would be the average assessed valuation residential parcel in the district. And again, that's in large part due to the M&O override increasing because the base support level increases, as well as our debt schedule as well, is also slightly increasing over the year. Here's all the factors that go into determining the tax. There's something called the qualifying tax rate. I'll try not to put everybody to sleep by going through all the funding components of that, but suffice it to say that the qualifying tax rate is set by a statewide assessed valuation change. Our assessed valuation changes differently than the entire state, and unfortunately that causes a slight tax increase to our local taxpayers. So with that, that's basically the budget, and I think I'm going to flip back to this page here just in case there happens to be any discussion, and maybe hopefully drive you to that discussion by showing this slide.
Go ahead.
Okay, so on that page, I had a few questions. On the additional school-based administrative support, what day, how are you deciding which schools are eligible? How are you calculating the student count there?
Vice President Tweedy, I merely took the proposal that the work group was working on and took the dollar value of that proposal. So it's been months since we've looked at that, and so I would have to rely on maybe Ms. Moffitt or somebody to refresh my memory.
Ms. Moffitt's on her way.
I'd like to know because it's right on the same line, what date we're calculating on those, the actual, yeah, the date of, in other words, what was our enrollment on? Was it the 100th day that we're using?
I actually do not remember the day we ran the numbers on. I could go back and find out. When the work team put this together, it was determined at that time that the proposal would move forward based on the numbers here. And then if the board approved this.
Has it been changed since you guys originally did it?
No.
Then it was not on the 100th day, because it was done prior to the
Would have been
100th
prior
day.
to, you're right.
Yeah.
Because it came before the holiday.
Because my concern is that if we are doing it on a date when our enrollment was less, and we're being funded on the 100th day, because when I looked at that, there were some, when you look at the enrollment, there were some that were losing a part-time, but then when you looked at the 100th day, they shouldn't have. So that's where my concern comes in. Because that was a question I posed, I want to say maybe 3-4 board meetings back.
The way that this would be implemented is it is run based on how this is proposed to be staffed for next year. If the board approves this, it then becomes our staffing standard that would be implemented for the 1920 year. So I have it right here. We have it as part of the update, so that the requirements then were 0.5 TOA, 450 students for a K-6 and up, 0.5 AP for a K-8 at 450 and up. 700 students for a K-6 and over would get a 1.0 TOA, and K-8 over 650 would get a 1.0 assistant principal.
But my concern is how we're determining how many students they have in this school.
Correct.
So, and then are we counting developmental preschool in those numbers? Because they still have to evaluate the developmental preschool teachers.
They do. And no, the typical peers are counted, but I'm sorry, is that the opposite way? Opposite, Jim? Not typical peers, but students on IEPs are counted, and typical peers who are paying tuition members of the classroom are not counted.
So all students that we receive funding for are counted in the numbers to
Yes.
determine eligibility for staffing?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess I would I would request clarification as to what schools will be getting this support and how we came up with those numbers, just to understand that.
Okay.
Because if they didn't have it on the 40th day and now they're over and now they don't get the support, that would be a concern.
So you're asking, because this is really a standard, it's not, it will apply differently each year. So what are you asking, if you pass it tonight or when in the near future, how will it apply next year on a chart or off the 100th day? Then we'll make decisions?
No, as far as the standard, I'm fine with the standard so long as we're using the 100th day for the calculation.
But we don't get to the 100th day until the 100th day. So
That's what I'm
what are you going to
saying.
do for 100 days?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So are you
You're gonna
projecting?
go backwards then? Is that what you're thinking?
When are you doing that projection? Because if you're taking away their TOA, and then
Yeah,
they,
the first year will be
and then they
different.
need them,
Yeah.
because you calculated when we had, 30 kids on vacay or whatever.
Yeah, I understand.
So or
We
are
could
we
make a
doing it on
decision
the,
to go
or are we doing
backwards.
it on the prior
Yeah.
year?
We could do it on the prior year. The first year will be the problem. After that, everything will, as long as we follow a system, it'll work out. But I don't know, Ms. Moffett might have some thoughts on that. I'm sure they discussed that.
So our staffing process is, as you know, is lengthy. We start around the month of December and we start to look and project numbers. So typically in the January, February month, we indicate what we feel they likely will be at. And then we track through open enrollment, parents that end up showing up and registering their child to gauge what that enrollment is going to be. And that is what we staff. When you've heard the whites of the eyes comments before, when the whites of the eyes show up, we then track that number for everything, classified, certified, and administrative staffing. So we don't actually run our staffing decisions on one date, like the 100th day. It definitely would be a factor we would want to consider, but I think we use many touch points to try and determine what the staffing would be, because you're absolutely right. Putting a staff member in and then taking them out it can be stressful. We have a surplus process, and it is a stressful process every single year. That's why we discussed this as well, that for year one, what was put in writing here will be what we apply for the 18-19 year, and then the following year, it'll follow the staffing process. Another method that we could use is looking at this now over the summertime and adjust it accordingly. It will cause more administrative movement to do that.
I mean, or I would use the enrollment they had at the end of the year and assuming that's going in, I mean, unless it were, your projections based on where they were at the end of the year. I'm just concerned that if someone had low enrollment and then grew, or vice versa, because you were talking about this early this school year and we don't go forward in the next year, we're going to end up with some schools that have over those numbers.
Yes.
They're not going to have the AP. They're going to be upset, and then they're going to be told this is what the board approved.
We do have discretion in situations like that. We use that discretion over the last couple of years. We've had a K-8 with lower enrollment that had a full-time assistant principal and a K-8 that came in with very high open enrollment, and we adjusted our assistant principal staffing accordingly. We do have discretion to support those that surprise us and come in higher than we projected, and the same for those that come in lower.
I guess where I mean, so we're not actually voting on that tonight anyways, but what I would really like to know is the numbers that you have there, because that's the staffing for the next year, is I'd like to know how far off that is from where we're at now.
Okay.
Because from the time you did that to where I looked at the 100th day, it was significant. And it was, and there were schools that were going to lose, you know, a half a admin. And then if you end up with disciplinary, or if you have a school that has a high SPED population, or maybe possibly a high behavioral, I just want to make sure that we are adequately staffing the support for those students and the support for those teachers, because they're not going to be able to teach if they're, you know, taking on that role. So I would just at least like to see that change.
So, Jenna, there is leeway for a number that's there for what possibly, so say the number was 450 and it came in at 4, or 800 and it came in, you know, five students lower, but you know that you have a very intensive student population. You have that authority to decide that and leave that person there, correct?
We do have a process for cabinet consideration when we see that there's a request that deviates from our enrollment standard. That can be looped into cabinet for consideration, and a decision can be made to add that staffing. We do the same when we find that a campus doesn't have the enrollment that they need. We have a process for reviewing that, as well as notification to the employees if we do need to surplus staff, and in administration, in classified, and in certified.
Okay, because I think the point of having the additional support is to support, not to go, oh my goodness, you know, you're down by 5 kids, where, you know, that's it, you don't need that support anymore. So there is more than a number that goes into a decision to leave somebody there or to move them someplace else they might be needed.
That is true.
And you have been, you've used different assistant principals that at some points in time, the population of where they first started was not absolutely there, but then there were 1 and sometimes 2 other schools that could use their help. So I know that you've done that, or that's been done before.
That is true.
Okay.
I do want to voice my support for a full-time district athletic director. I have, just for example, I have spoken to 3 parents in the last 2 days where I think that having a full-time person in that position would help to bring some continuity and consistency throughout the district, to maybe avoid some of the concerns that get raised to the district level. And ultimately, I say that because, not because I am concerned about our district administrator's workload, but additionally, I'm incredibly concerned about the impact it has on our students and at our campuses, and athletics, or extracurricular activities, or the co-curricular activities that will fall under that position. They are an important part of our students' junior high and high school experience. I think that we have unfortunately, suffered a little bit without having that position fulfilled. So I do wholeheartedly support that position.
I just want to add a couple sentences there, as I've shared with the Thursday update, but for the audience that's watching. What I really did was begin to go back in our past, and I think it was 6 years ago we had this position, and it helped also with parent complaints. So I just dusted off the old job description and changed the date and ran it back through the machine. So I think that they'll also help us in another way, and that is to give more building support from ALS. So I think that's a good combination. That was a position, so it's really just filling a position that we already had 6 years ago. And I think that's the way to go.
I would support it also because I think perhaps a lot of those complaints might be prevented when we have somebody that can explain how things are done and not done. And there's a accountability as their job, not like, oh my gosh, I've got to do this too, as an assistant principal or a principal, because I know they all love so much doing that job for the last couple of years. So I would support it. I just think gives a little bit more uniformity and equity to our student athletes, and also lets our admin concentrate on their actual duties. So
We will still need a campus AD. An AP will take up that, correct?
Say that again?
We're still going to have a
Correct.
campus. Okay, yeah,
Yep.
okay, so yeah, they
It's
will.
more,
Yeah, this is just,
more of
no,
a
this is
system
the-
person.
Right, so it's someone who will bring the standards and make sure that we're hiring appropriately and
Yeah.
holding to the true standards.
And I
Because
think
that, I
that,
think, is what we've been missing.
I totally agree. We don't have continuity and consistency in our system. A lot of folks are just carrying the ball the direction that they think they need to go, but we need to be all on the same team. And I think we actually have paid for that, not being consistent. So it'd be nice to get one handbook, one payment system, one way we get helmets, one game. There's so much in the system that could be all uniform and consistent, and eventually save us dollars as well.
I have a few more questions. So on the sub pay, what do we pay long-term subs? Is that impacted or no?
Vice President Tweedy, yeah, so it's, we would increase all the substitute pays by $5. So the long-term sub at $120 would go to $125.
Okay, and that's, we're paying less than other districts now?
We are.
Okay. And do we have a sub shortage? I'm assuming we do.
I don't know that we have a shortage in the number of subs. I think what has been brought to our attention by the substitutes is that as minimum wage continues to increase, and when it gets to $12 an hour, they're basically making minimum wage for having the credential to actually be a substitute teacher. So it was a small attempt to try and provide it was an attempt to provide a small increase to value those people that we do sometimes have a hard time filling all the vacancies. I don't know that we have a shortage as much as we have trouble filling all the
That's what I meant.
vacancies.
But the other question I had, are we, because I heard something and I could be off base here, are we still requiring subs to have bachelor degrees? Or I heard the state had an emergency sub provision where you didn't have to have a degree. Is that true or not true?
That doesn't sound familiar to me. I'd have
Okay.
to check into that for you.
Okay.
Currently, I believe they still require the bachelor's degree.
Okay, good.
And to-
Okay, and
I'm
then-
sorry, to that point, sorry, Mrs. Tweedy, while we're on that, does bringing it to 90 make us equal or in this competitive, thank you,
Sorry.
with our surrounding districts?
Vice President Tweedy, Ms. O'Brien, yes, it would make us more competitive than we currently are because we're short of nearly all of our neighboring districts.
So 90, are we still short at 90, I guess is my question then.
It would depend on what district you compare ourselves to, but it's closer to the average of the.
Closer, okay. Thank you, Mr. Migloriano.
My other couple questions, and I'm sorry here, I know I'm asking a million. Did we spend the results-based funding? There was about $1 million this year, or is it carrying into next year? I don't see it up here.
Vice President Tweedy, that's a great question. It is one of our outstanding items from NST. We did not we did not complete the work, so that $1.1 million of results-based funding just rolls forward without a plan at this point in time. So we still will include it in the proposed budget, but we don't have a plan for how to expend it at this point in time. That at least was agreed upon by the NST process.
So it's not included in the numbers up here right now, but it will be next time when you present it?
It's not included in here because it's not M&O, so it's not in the maintenance and operation budget, so
Oh,
it wouldn't
okay.
show up in here even when we did have a plan.
Okay.
But it's going to be its own separate plan and separate fund, and we don't know what that, how that's going to unfold at this point in time. We don't have an agreement amongst the employee groups to be able to share with the board. Now, the board can make a decision, and we could come up with an administrative recommendation, but we felt it was important to go through the employee associations to get that input.
Okay, and then my next two questions. On the district additional assistance that's moving, that's going to be in the bond, the $4 million. Oh, it's over $4 million, $4,882. You said some of it's going to the campuses. How will that amount? I know a lot of the campuses have told me that they haven't had adequate capital. Well, I know it's been a problem for everyone, allocations for years, and that they had a lot of needs. So I know that's going to be appreciated. So how is that? How are we going to determine how much capital money each school receives of that?
Vice President Tweedy, that's allocated based on a per pupil amount. And what we've allowed the schools to do, again, with district additional assistance at one point in time being virtually cut by over 90%, we had no means to be able to provide capital funding for schools. There was a point in time where we had zero capital funding for school allocation, as well as for departments, and we had an emergency capital grant process that they could submit to us, and we took them on a case-by-case basis where we had a committee that actually reviewed those. It's been several years since that process was abandoned in favor of I'll call it a minimalized allocation to the schools. To put it in perspective, at one point in time, our capital budget for the district was over $16 million. Based on the continuing district additional cuts, and that's even with some of the district additional assistance being restored, it's only 5.5. It's not even $5.5 million. So, but the $4.8 million is allocated based, or the $750,000 allocated to the schools based on a per student allocation that we provide to them. And we also allow the schools to roll their capital forward. So if they have some unspent money from previous years, that gets rolled forward as well.
Could you share that funding with us in a future update? How that works? How it's gonna get dispersed at the school level?
Certainly.
And then my final question, if you could go back to the class size page.
Darcy, before you go on, can I ask you a question on that? Just staying on the funding per, because I saw it on a document somewhere, and I guess it's just an opportune time to ask it, where a school campus is being given, let's say, $6,000 of capital, and then they're getting a bill from the district that's going to need to be paid that covers carpet blowers or the air conditioning or something like that. Are we giving them? I mean, they're having to replace something that, in my opinion, would be a district expense, an overall district expense. So we're not really giving it to them if we're giving them an allocation and then a bill. And that may have been a weird situation. I probably should have asked the principal more about it, but are we giving them what they need for their campus, and then we're providing the basics because that's as a district should? Or are we giving them an allocation and saying, your vacuum cleaners, your expense, your carpet blowers, your that type of stuff? I mean, obviously, maybe supplies are if it's a campus supply, but we have a maintenance department that should be buying a bulk supply. So how are we managing that?
Vice President Tweedy, Ms. Fisher, I'm not sure of the specifics, so I'd need to know more of the details. I am familiar with scenarios in which somebody will bring to us that maybe a piece of equipment prematurely will fail due to misuse, and we will partner with the school to be able to say, hey, you know what, we'll come up with a portion of it, I'll just make up a number, 50% of it if you guys want to come up with 50% of the cost. So if that's deemed as them getting a bill for it, we see it as a way to partner with them.
Well, this one specifically was a carpet blower, a carpet dryer. It was, when you have a spill or whatever and you get those blowers that they dry the carpet. And to me, that doesn't seem like that's like a maintenance expense, that we should have a maintenance department that would have blowers that would take them to whatever location they were needed. That doesn't seem like a campus expense. That just happened to be the item. And it just happened to be like $500 less than the allocation they were just being given. And to me, it was surprising.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time. The devices we use to dry things are not that expensive. If it was an extracting machine or something of that nature, those are much more expensive. But just the fans that we use to blow things
It could have
dry,
been an extracting. It just said it was for that.
that wouldn't be worth the conversation that we're having so far.
I guess could you just let us know what, if any, what restrictions, in other words, okay, you give them an allocation, to what extent do you tell them that's for? In other words, what are they expected to cover out of that? Is it for, repair of desks and stuff? Is it for, give us a ballpark idea of what that use is.
I wouldn't be able to provide that to you because we rely, because it's a per student allocation, we rely on the school personnel to be able to determine the greatest needs on their campus. So it's going to depend on the campus, and it's going to depend on the person. There are some people that are focused on, various aspects of their school more so than others.
So if they need a copier?
Copiers we try and provide we have a basic.
I guess that's what I'm saying is I want to know what are the things that the district does that does not require them to jump into that. Copiers, some of those basics. These are a basic, what we do not consider a campus expense versus what is, discretionary. And I'm not sure if you have something like that, but I've spoke with a couple of principals that have said it's been a concern.
Perhaps maybe we can mull over this and figure out some better words to use to help you. Because I know that
I can reach out to those principals and get different.
I know that
specifics.
specific stories have different contexts than whatever. I mean, somebody could have had a refrigerator that broke or a freezer, and that would be something that the district would come out and do. But if somebody left the freezer door open and it was a human mistake, perhaps then the campus picks that up. I don't know.
Right.
But maybe we'll get you better words so you can more explain what the district pays.
So I just want to make sure that we're not giving them money and then just saying, here it is, now it's gone.
Well, and I think the thing would be, are there capital items that are on a normal replacement schedule that the school is expected to purchase? That's what I guess my question would be.
Vice President Tweedy, yes. I mean, I'm not sure what else they would use the money for. I mean,
Stuff on a
it's for
normal replacement, like you said, let's just say you were to say, like equipment in the kitchen broke, or not broke, aged out. You need to buy a new blank this year, as opposed to them saying, wow, the desks are falling apart. That's the question.
To that point, I think what we're trying to understand, maybe, which is a little bit more in the weeds, is when we give that a dollar amount to per student dollar amount to the districts and say this is your capital money, what is the district's policy on what that covers? And if it's like each school is set up as or thought of as a small business where you say, here's your budget, now you're responsible. If there's something catastrophic, talk to us. And I'm really oversimplifying this. I believe that's what my fellow board members are trying to understand. And so if maybe Dr. Finch, you could talk to Mr. Miglerino in that and provide us some additional information about that process and those dollars in a Thursday update, I think that would be helpful.
I do believe that's a good explanation, because I guess the point I'm trying to get to is if we are expecting them to run like a little business they're their own little district, we need to make sure whatever that allocation is enough. So if we're holding a portion here and giving them a small portion, they're expected to cover all their expenses, I think we need to quit holding so much here and give it to them. That's more the point. Are we giving them adequate
that principals are human. They're like everyone else. There's going to have a wide range. Some are going to hoard it and might have tens of thousands in their piggy bank, and there might be some that spend it and more every year. And we visit with those folks as well. So I don't disagree with you that we need a general philosophy, general guiding principles of this is generally what we cover. But I think Mr. Migliorino is trying to explain to you that it is so complex because each building is different. Each principal has different priorities, et cetera. But there's no reason why we couldn't talk about guidelines or something like that might be helpful. We can work on that.
And just understand what we're doing. Yeah.
Sure. Sure, we can look at it.
I mean, anybody who's worked in a school district of more than one school realizes each principal is different in what they do, but they should all expect that a building is standing, the lights are on. They should expect the basics, I guess.
Yeah, we never gave our buildings capital, so this is unique to me. The district handled it all, and so the principals didn't have discretion with this. So this is unique to me, and I'll be learning a little bit more myself.
And my final question, can we go back to the class size page?
Oh, I think
So if I'm looking at, I know you said you're doing the +1, but when you compare the certified manual to the gold book, but at the middle school and high school level, the certified manual says near 37. And I think it's great if high schoolers are going to be 27.5. I hope my son gets some of those classes next year. He didn't have any this year, I don't think. But I'm just curious because we're not holding true to the certified manual on those numbers. But then we have the +1 at 4th through 6th. So I guess two questions. I'm just curious why we're staffing middle school and high school so much lower than the certified and using +1 for everyone else. And then I guess the second part of that question would be, I want to understand the implication of using the +1 staffing. I wanted to know how many classes in our district ended up being above or approved, certified, what was in the certified manual. Because we're using the staffing model. So, for example, if we had 32 for 4th grade, how many 4th grade classes did we end up with more than 32 students using this staff? I just want to understand the repercussions of this.
We're trying to decide how we want to carve that up, I guess. I'll start with just the tighter staffing model was used again to try and avoid surplus, so that we don't have somebody placed in a position that ultimately has to be moved because the students aren't realized, because we're using a projection. And we found that it was effective in terms of reducing the amount of surplus. In terms of how many people, so we had, I think, 13 FTE in the contingency for this year. I think in terms of teaching staff that we deployed was 7. Ms. Moffitt might remember exactly.
Information I can find for you very quickly, as well as how many classrooms were over right off the bat.
Because that's, I get trying to not surplus teachers, but again, I want to know what the impact to students is using this model. How many students do we end up in hugely crowded classrooms? And so how many students we're over would be the impact to the student, and I'm concerned about that. And I have heard of examples, but I don't know how widespread the problem is.
So could we get that in an update?
Sure.
Uh,
We can do that.
While you're adding it, because that was kind of similar to the question I had emailed Dr. Finch earlier, and he gave me the +1 answer, which was fine. I understood that. But the one thing I didn't get is my secondary question is, why are we so much higher in the 4th through 6th grade? These are these are foundational years. Does our certified manual really have those foundational years with larger class sizes like that? And is that good for our kids? Because I could handle 33 high schoolers. I could not handle 33 4th graders. Maybe
not
with
built for
duct
that.
tape, but other than that,
Yeah.
I don't know how our poor teachers handle it, because those little bodies they don't even know how to keep themselves in their seat half the time. You know, I guess I'm a little concerned with the 4th through the 6th, even the 3rd through the 6th. Those are really big class sizes, even if you take away our +1. And I just, maybe I need to find that certified manual and look at it, but
I think this is
that
a good place for Jim to talk
giant.
about our neighbors and class sizes. And you also talk a lot about, in the past you have talked about it, which I thought was interesting. You talked about elementary, middle, and high school in relationship to our neighbors and the relationship to the state, and what the Auditor General said about our class sizes.
That's using averages.
Right,
Averages
but-
unrealistic.
Our peers, we have to talk about the actual class size, not our adopted.
Now remember too that this is every tick that you go up. I think Jim talked about this, has presented a couple times. If you add X amount of kids per classroom or reduce per class, millions of dollars in, and that is a choice that you can make as board members. But that one tick, I'm putting Jim on the spot, but he's talked about that a bunch. The millions of dollars that are saved by our lower class sizes compared to our peers on average. I'm putting you on the spot, but remember you talked about that. How many millions of dollars was it per?
I think
Kid.
for each tenth, it was
Tenth,
just
that's
over
what it was.
$600,000 for each tenth of a percent, or on that ratio, student to teacher ratio.
How many
was-
teachers do we not have in the classroom, though?
I mean, well, in like a homeroom classroom, because like a PE teacher doesn't have a homeroom, but is still
Oh.
a teacher.
That's not what I mean. I mean, like we had, a couple years back, maybe we don't have them anymore. But we had teachers, the academic facilitators that were here. We had something like 12, 13 of them. Or teachers on assignment that don't, I mean, how is that skewing our numbers?
So those that aren't actually doing direct instruction, we don't code to Function 1000, nor do we code them to the teacher account in the school district employee report or the SDER.
So they're not in part of our 17.5 to 1?
They are not. And
Are they coded under admin? Where are they coded?
under instructional support.
I'd like to add to that as well. About 2, maybe 3 years ago, the board at that time had a similar question to Ms. Tweedy's question, and we ran the cost of every classroom at that point in time. If it was over by 1, over by 2 students, we have a formula for adding aid time and then a formula for adding a teacher. If at that time we added a teacher for every single classroom across the district that was over, it was going to cost us $1.5 million.
And in the
So that's
report,
something similar I could run for you again now.
and the report that Ms. Karen Smith was working on, it looks like it's not unusual that the other districts that responded also increase their class size as the grade levels increase. So, for example, Paradise
But ours
Valley-
actually go down for high school and middle schools.
Correct, and there are some reasons for middle school and high school, especially when it comes to highly qualified credentials, to be able to instruct the myriad of classes that we offer. And that's typical also amongst those peers as well. But in those 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grades, you'll see the numbers actually increase for all the districts, including ours. At least the stated adopted class sizes.
And similar to Ms. Fisher's comments about those grade bands being different than high school and college level students, the same is considered for the primary. And that is one of the rationale for having the smaller classroom sizes in primaries. They're still learning how to function in a classroom. When in the intermediate grades, there's less time spent on functioning in the classroom and more time spent learning content. That's what we hear from our stakeholders when we're discussing those numbers, and those have been our numbers for a very, very long time. I'd like to also point out for high school, our classroom sizes, we don't anticipate that the classroom size is going to be 27.5. That would be an on average, because some of the classrooms are very small and some of them are larger, and the certified manual only points out what we try not to go over, and then outlines a process for addressing that if it does start to approach that number. That divisor is what we use to determine FTE on the campus. And that 27.5 is not in the certified manual.
So you guys have some reports that you're going to send us in a Thursday update?
Sounds like it can be the abridged version.
Awesome.
Nice and
Thank
light.
you very much for your information.
We're done, thank you. We have no more discussion on this, right? We're good?
Good
Oh.
question, so good job.
Okay, so now we're moving on to item 7A. Oh, no, nope.
That was
8A, future
Future.
meeting dates. Do we have something, though?
They're posted.
We're good? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Aye.
All those in
Aye.
favor? Aye. 4-0 passes.
All right.